Hello. For this week's entry, when discussing a patient with a new experience that was significant to me, I had a recent patient. She's a female. She's actually a registered nurse, and she does have a diagnosis of anxiety as well as depression, major depressive disorder, recurrent moderate. And she was notifying the nurse practitioner that she recently started feeling like she's been having issues in her life with relationships for a very long time, and it's starting to make her think harder about what the problem could be, even though she knows that her depression a lot of the times makes her feels like she don't have much worth. Also, it's not just about the relationships with her mates, but also even with like her sister. And she says sometimes she even have issues with forming relationships with coworkers. And she says she's never thought it in the past, but recently she now thinks that she may have borderline personality disorder or another diagnosis that she's never been diagnosed with. And one of the biggest things that the nurse practitioner did with her, I think, is reflection. And she did some reflecting back on her childhood and some of her childhood experiences. And what she hadn't really thought about or came to mind to think about it was her relationship issues that she had as a child with her parents. She had been raised by her grandparents. She automatically thought that it had to been something wrong and there has to be a diagnosis related to it versus actually doing some assessing of her past and thinking that maybe this action is due to this action. Well, this reaction is due to this action when I was a child. The nurse practitioner role to me was very significant because I felt like she was very empathetic with her and understanding, and she actually took time with her to go into her past and dive into experiences that she's had to give her a better understanding of things that she might didn't recognize, remember, or see because she had not even thought anything about her situation of how she was raised. She never put any thought into her never having a good relationship with her mother and her father, and her mother actually was a drug addict, unfortunately, and her father, he just wasn't present. There was no particular reason, but he just wasn't a father that was present. So she was raised by her grandparents, and she felt like even when she was in school, she couldn't maintain good relationships with schoolmates when they actually started talking more and started thinking a little bit deeper. But most of it started when she ended up with her grandparents because she was with her mother young childhood, but she ended up with her grandparents probably when she was around 11, 12, she said. And she felt like that's when the issues changed. So she did refer her to do some type of forms of therapy. And one in particular was cognitive behavioral therapy. And she also did make some adjustments to her medication. She increased her antidepressant, but she wanted her to understand that it was bigger than just a medication thing. It was actually an understanding thing of exactly where this started, what the experiences were as a child that brought her to where she was now. When exploring my personal strengths and limitations with this patient, I would say with this situation, in the provider-patient relationship, I would say a strength would be also thinking of the same things that the nurse practitioner did, because my key thoughts in my mind was, I wonder what type of childhood she had. I think that has a lot to do with what we learned from things like ACEs. And so I automatically started feeling like myself, I wonder when this started and what was the reason for it. So I do think I have a strength of seeing the bigger picture and not always thinking about the worst. And in her case, she was just trying to put a bad label on herself. Not saying that those type of diagnoses are bad labels, but that was just, to me, easier for her than for her to try to figure out exactly what was going on. And for myself, limitations, I would say probably feeling kind of sad for her because it reminded me a lot of my own childhood. I had a good relationship with my mom and my grandparents, but my dad died when I was young. So I felt like for a long time when I would get around other kids who had a father, and I listened to their stories about how great their dad was or things they did with their dad, even though I had a father figure, it wasn't the same. It was hard for me to kind of stick to those type of friendships because I really didn't want to hear it because it would hurt my feelings. So it kind of reminded me a lot of myself. So that probably would be a limitation, probably connecting it and relating it to my personal life. I also, when it comes to identifying some specific things that I learned from reflecting on the event, it would be just to take time with your patients. And I feel like that's why the PMHNP role is so significant, because they take so much time. I work in a mental health hospital. These psychiatrists that come in and they just in and out, in and out. Every psychiatrist that I have seen has done the same thing. But the nurse practitioners that I see, they just have so much more compassion. And I love that about it. That's why I think I chose to want to further my education to be a nurse practitioner. Because, like I said in my previous journal, we start with compassion in nursing, and then it goes on to take us to our next role of being a nurse practitioner. So I just feel like you have a more holistic approach with patients in this role. And that's about sums it up. Thank you.